In this video, we'll talk about how to write a vector in component form. So let's check out our definition. Given an initial point P with coordinates x1 and y1 and terminal point Q with coordinates x2, y2, then a vector in component form is written in this form: x2 minus x1, comma y2 minus y1. So if we want to visualize this, if we have some vector with an initial point P and we say the coordinates are x1, y1, and we know that the terminal point, if we want to label that Q, with coordinates x2, y2, then to write this vector in component form, we simply need to do x2 minus x1, comma y2 minus y1. So let's work through a couple examples and see what that looks like. So let's say we're given some vector with an initial point P of 3, comma 2, and a terminal point Q with coordinates 8, comma 9. How can we write this vector in component form? Well, using this definition, we can say v is equal to x2 minus x1. So if we want to label these, we can say this is x1, this is y1, this is x2, and this is y2. x2 minus x1, that would be 8 minus 3, comma y2 minus y1. So y2 is 9, minus y1 is 2. So we say v is equal to 8 minus 3, that's 5, and 9 minus 2, that's 7. So this is the component form of this vector that has an initial point P and a terminal point Q. Now if we wanted to visualize what we just found, this won't be drawn to scale, but it'll just give us a good idea of what we're doing here. So the initial point P is 3, comma 2. So here's P, and then Q is 8, comma 9. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Again, not drawn to scale, but just to give us an idea. So here's P, and here's Q. This was our initial vector, and we just found the component form to be 5, comma 7. So what that's saying is, if we were to move this vector to the origin, 5, comma 7 would be the new terminal point. So 5, comma 7 somewhere up here. This is our vector in component form. Now notice it's the exact same vector, but we simply moved it to the origin. So it has the same angle, same magnitude, same everything. We just moved it to the origin, and we found that in component form, we would write that as 5, comma 7. Okay, let's try another one. Let's say we have another vector where the initial point P is 5, comma 3, and the terminal point Q is 1, comma 0. How can we write this vector in component form? Well, let's label this as x1 and y1. Let's label our terminal point as x2 and y2. Using the formula here, we can write the component form is x2 minus x1, so 1 minus 5, comma y2 minus y1, so that's 0 minus 3. So we get the vector in component form is 1 minus 5 is negative 4, 0 minus 3 is negative 3. So here's our vector in component form. And if we want to visualize what we just did, we can draw a little xy plane over here. So we said P is our initial point, that's 5, comma 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3. So P is right here. And Q we said was 1, 0. So 1, and that y coordinate is 0. So here's Q. So here was our initial vector. And we just found that this vector in component form is negative 4, negative 3. So that means if we imagine that we moved this vector to the origin, to start at the origin, it would have an ending point or a terminal point at negative 4, negative 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. It would end right here. So this is our vector in component form. It's the exact same as the initial vector, we just simply moved it to the origin. And we found that it would have a terminal point of negative 4, negative 3. All right, let's try one more example. Let's say we have a vector with initial point negative 1, and a terminal point of negative 1, 1. How can we write this vector in component form? Well, it helps if we first label this initial point as x1, y1, and label this terminal point as x2, y2. So in component form, we would write x2 minus x1, so -1 minus -1. And then we have y2 minus y1, so 1 minus -1. So we get -1 minus a -1. When we subtract a negative number, that's the same as adding. So we can really do -1 plus 1, that's 0. And then we have 1 minus a -1. So again, we're subtracting a negative, so it becomes a positive. So 1 plus 1 is 2. So this is our vector in component form. And if we want to visualize this situation, our P, our initial point, is -1, -1. So here's P. And Q, our terminal point, was -1, +1. So here's Q. So this was our initial vector going this way. And we found that our component form of this vector is 0, 2. So we're just saying if we imagine that we move this vector to the origin, it would have a new terminal point of 0, 2. So this is what that vector would look like. Exact same vector, we just shifted it to the origin. So those were 3 examples of how to write a vector given an initial point and a terminal point in component form.